Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights. Today, we're diving into something really quite surprising, maybe even counterintuitive in geopolitics. The United States, traditionally an ally of Brazil, launching what, sources are calling a multifaceted pressure campaign, almost an attack. And this isn't against some rival state, it's significant trade tariffs, sanctions leveled against a partner. So our mission today is to unpack these recent actions by the U.S. Trump administration, targeting Brazil's government, its judicial system too. We want to explore, why Brazil? What are the specific issues? How's Brazil pushing back? And maybe the big question, what are the potential backfire implications for the global order? All drawn from the sources we've got in front of us. Let's jump in.
Yeah, and what the sources really emphasize is just how unprecedented this feels. This attack by the Trump administration on Brazil's government, its judiciary, it's more than just economic pressure, it's broader.
Okay, so let's start with that economic pressure.
Yeah.
We're talking substantial measures here, right? What was the sort of opening shot?
Well, the main lever was slapping these 50% tariffs on Brazilian imports.
50%?
Yeah, and it's pretty striking because the U.S. actually runs a trade surplus with Brazil normally.
Right.
Now, about 43% of Brazilian exports were exempted, things like orange juice, iron ore, aircraft.
Okay.
But really key items, coffee, beef, they were definitely not spared. They got hit by the tariffs.
So it's targeted, but it's not just economic. You mentioned the judiciary. It sounds like the U.S. actions go deeper right into Brazil's legal system. What do the sources say there?
That's exactly right. They've specifically sanctioned a Supreme Court justice, Alexandre de Moraes.
Moraes, okay. He's a big name there.
Very. He's the one currently prosecuting former President Jair Bolsonaro, alleging Bolsonaro plotted to overturn the 2022 election results.
Ah, okay.
So sanctioning him, it's widely seen as a pretty direct attempt to, undermine the Brazilian judicial system itself.
That's a strong move. What's the U.S. justification? What are they actually accusing Justice Moraes of?
Well, the official accusations are quite point. U.S. officials accused him of authorizing arbitrary pretrial detentions and also suppressing freedom of expression.
And this wasn't just like a statement. There was follow-through.
Oh, yeah. Shortly after the sanctions, Trump signed an executive order.
An executive order.
Declaring a new national emergency, setting up those tariffs we mentioned, and explicitly claiming Brazilian government policies were, quote, harming U.S. companies, the free speech rights of U.S. persons, U.S. foreign policy, and the U.S. economy.
That sounds like it connects some familiar political dots. Does the order actually mention Bolsonaro directly? Defend him?
It does, explicitly. The order accuses the Brazilian government of, and I'm quoting here, politically motivated persecution, intimidation, harassment, censorship, and prosecution of Bolsonaro and his supporters. Wow. It even calls these serious human rights abuses that have undermined the rule of law in Brazil. Now, it's really important to state, Brazil has flat out rejected these accusations.
Right.
And, looking bigger picture, Trump and Bolsonaro, they certainly share some common ground, especially on anti-democratic type policies. And of course, Trump himself has faced similar accusations about trying to subvert an election.
There's definitely a pattern emerging, and it sounds like digital communications, tech platforms, that's another flashpoint involving Justice Moraes.
Absolutely. That's a crucial piece. Both Trump and, frankly, Silicon Valley have shown really strong opposition to basically any regulation of digital communications.
And Moraes stepped into that.
He did. In 2024, he actually banned Elon Musk's X platform in Brazil.
Banned it outright. Why?
Because X refused court orders to remove accounts spreading far-right misinformation, and also it hadn't appointed a local legal representative in Brazil, which is required.
So how did Musk respond to being banned?
Well, initially X refused to comply. Musk even filed a lawsuit.
Okay.
But, facing the loss of a massive market like Brazil, eventually Musk backed down, paid a $5 million fine.
But he wasn't happy about it.
Not at all. He kept publicly accusing Moraes of censoring X. And this wasn't like a one-off thing either. Trump's own media company, the parent of Truth Social, had actually filed an earlier lawsuit against Moraes for banning a U.S.-based account holder.
Okay, so we have the tariffs, the sanctions on Moraes, these digital fights. But zooming out, what do the sources suggest are the deeper motivations? Why pick on Brazil, and why right now? Feels like there's more going on.
That's a really good question. And the sources suggest, yeah, it's much more than just tariffs or, defending a political buddy like Bolsonaro. Sure, it's tied into Trump's whole Make America Great Again agenda, MAGA, which has seen the U.S. cozying up to some anti-democratic leaders globally.
Right.
But it's also being framed as a kind of, well, a clumsy reaction, frankly, to this much bigger global shift that's happening, countries wanting to reform the international system.
A clumsy reaction. So is Brazil maybe being used to send a message to others, like a warning shot?
Precisely. That seems to be the core reason, according to these analyses. Targeting Brazil is meant as a warning, especially to other BRICS countries, South Africa, India.
BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Exactly. And Washington wants to influence some key areas: how digital communications are controlled, the move towards using currencies other than the US dollar in trade, and of course, relationships with China. It's a signal about who's boss, basically.
This really does sound like a familiar pattern from Trump's first term, doesn't it? Using these kinds of tactics.
Oh, very much so. It fits right into his established playbook. Trump has consistently used trade tariffs to, well, coerce allies, limit their access to the U.S. market, push the interests of U.S. companies abroad, and sometimes, his own private interests too, all while boosting the Majamar brand back home. This Brazil strategy fits right in.
But Brazil isn't just rolling over, is it? Despite all this pressure, the country seems pretty resilient, and the global landscape around it is definitely changing.
That's right. Brazil will certainly feel these tariffs, no doubt. But its economy is relatively strong. And critically, it has a lot of different alliances and relationships. It's not solely reliant on the U.S.
So what are they doing? Are there specific counter moves from Brazil?
Yes. The Brazilian National Congress, their legislature, has already authorized retaliation measures. That could include things related to intellectual property. And they're also seriously talking about taking this whole thing to the World Trade Organization, the WTO. That would be a major formal challenge.
Okay, Brazil fighting back. And you mentioned diverse relationships. Our sources really highlight one in particular, China. How significant is China in this whole equation?
It's huge. China is actually Brazil's #1 trading partner. They take 26% of Brazil's exports.
26%?
Yeah, that's literally double what the U.S. buys from Brazil.
Wow.
And, very tellingly, right after these new U.S. tariffs hit, China basically signaled, hey, we're ready to buy more Brazilian coffee.
Ah, directly counteracting the U.S. move.
Exactly. It bolsters Brazil's position, helps them diversify away from the pressure.
And President Lula da Silva himself had something pretty pointed to say about this, didn't he? About Brazil's approach.
He did, yeah. Lula put it very bluntly. He said, basically, we have an amazing trade relationship with China. If the U.S. and China want a Cold War, fine, but we're not getting involved. He added, I don't have a preference. I just want to sell to whoever wants to buy, whoever pays more. It's pure pragmatism. Business over ideology.
And we're seeing actual deals being signed, too, not just talk.
Absolutely. Just last November, during the G20 summit hosted in Brazil, Lula's government signed 15 cooperation agreements with China.
15?
Yeah. And significantly, there was also this memorandum of understanding between Brazil's state telecom company, Telebras, and a Chinese satellite provider called SpaceSail.
Interesting. Why is that significant?
Because it could potentially offer an alternative to Elon Musk's Starlink. Starlink currently dominates almost half the Brazilian satellite internet market. So this is a clear step towards diversifying their digital infrastructure too, moving away from U.S. tech dominance.
And speaking of these shifting dynamics, that BRICS group you mentioned earlier, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, it seems to be gaining real traction in this kind of environment.
It definitely seems that way. Now, it's often described as a loose alliance, not like NATO or something.
Right.
But members like Brazil, India, South Africa, they are actively pushing for reforms. Reforms to trade, finance, the whole multilateral system. Importantly, they want to reform it without completely breaking it.
Different motivations within the group, though.
For sure. China sees BRICS as part of a long-term strategy to reshape global power, maybe challenge U.S. hegemony eventually. Russia, for them, it's largely a way to try and get around Western sanctions. So, yeah, different aims, but they're converging on this idea of reform.
And it seems the U.S. isn't just having friction with Brazil within BRICS. South Africa, too.
Yeah, tensions are quite high there as well. The U.S. administration actually refused to attend preparatory meetings for the next G20 summit, which is set to be hosted by South Africa in November.
Really? Why?
The U.S. accused South Africa of being anti-American. Part of that seems to be anger over South Africa and Brazil, too, criticizing Israel and the war in Gaza. Plus, you have Trump's history there. He previously made these, frankly, false accusations about the South African government carrying out ethnic cleansing against white South Africans. That baggage certainly doesn't help the relationship.
So it's not just BRICS. Brazil has other options too, like Europe.
That's right. There's the big EU-Mercosur trade agreement. Mercosur is the South American trade bloc. That agreement is currently sitting with the EU, waiting for ratification. President Lula definitely wants that deal finalized, sooner rather than later. It's another way for Brazil to spread its economic bets.
Which brings us to the really big question. Could this whole Trump strategy just backfire? Not just for U.S.-Brazil relations, but more broadly.
The sources suggest that's a very real risk, yeah. Instead of achieving the goal, which seems to be maintaining U.S. influence or the status quo, these policies might actually end up undermining the global economy, and they could increase the sort of international delegitimization of the U.S.
So making the U.S. look less like a reliable partner.
Exactly. And the crucial point several analysts make is that Trump's policies, rather than stopping or even slowing down this reorganization of the global system, they might actually be accelerating it, pushing countries like Brazil towards other partners faster.
Okay, so that's the global picture. What about inside Brazil? How is all this U.S. pressure landing domestically? Is it dividing the country or?
It's a bit of a mixed picture, but dominant trend seems to be unification, actually. On one hand, yes, the pressure has led the Brazilian government to sort of open talks with big tech companies about maybe revising, possibly easing up on some regulations.
Okay, so some effect there.
But there's a much bigger counter effect. These U.S. attempts to, as Brazilians see it, subjugate their judicial system and their government. That's generating really strong nationalist feelings and, frankly, quite a bit of anti-U.S. sentiment.
Interesting. So it's not weakening the current government under Lula. It might be strengthening it.
That's exactly what seems to be happening. Support for Lula is reportedly growing, and not just from his base on the left, but from the right as well.
Even from the right.
Yeah. Even Estado de São Paulo, which is generally seen as Brazil's most conservative major newspaper, has taken a really strong anti-Trump stance on this. They accused him of, quote, mafia-like blackmail.
Mafia-like blackmail, strong words.
Very. And some sources even speculate that if Lula wins re-election in 2026, it might be partly thanks to the nationalist boost he's gotten from Trump's MAGA foreign policy towards Brazil. Quite the ironic twist.
So we've really unpacked a complex, multi-layered situation here in this deep dive into U.S.-Brazil relations. What we've seen, I think, is how actions designed to coerce or control one country can actually ripple outwards, leading to some really surprising, maybe even opposite outcomes on the world stage. So here's something to think about. In this world where alliances and power are constantly shifting, what does the situation in Brazil tell you about the future? The future of global leadership, the rise of these so-called middle powers. How might these attempts to kind of lock down the status quo actually end up speeding up the very changes they're trying to prevent? What does it mean for trade, for technology, for diplomacy in the years ahead? Lots to consider there.